Everybody, welcome to our pre-budget or preliminary budget meeting, I guess. First of a whole bunch of meetings between now and the time we pass this budget in hopefully April, end of April, early May. Let's acknowledge our friends and neighbors of the Prophet River and for Fort Nelson First Nations and recognize the traditional territory that they've called home for thousands of years. Also, I'd like to say that that this meeting is available to the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. So the agenda is like really big. Like you're not expecting to do all these tabs today, are you? Like, okay, so so this meeting will just run. We'll just recess it right between
That's
the
correct,
different times. So
it'll be one big meeting.
Yeah, okay. We'll just keep it one meeting. I thought it was a little aggressive to be able to get through all of these tabs at the same time. Yeah, it was just, she just prepared one for me to cover page. All right, everybody's okay with the budget process, okay? Then let's do the review of the 2023 preliminary budget, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Barry.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Welcome, everyone. And yes, it's a very large agenda, but the intent is to do a stop at 1 today and then reconvene at 5, from 5 till 7 tonight, and then recess again and then reconvene again tomorrow, and so on and so forth. The intent is we'll go as fast or as slow as council needs. We'll dig into whatever is required. There's a PowerPoint that's up there, but it's just use the guide as we walk through, and for people that are tuning in virtually, the intent is we'll go tab by tab in the document as we go forward. Department heads will be presenting their budget, so I'll be sitting in the chair the next between Jay and Councillor Enax and presenting their operational budgets, their special projects, and then once we get to the back of the binder, any capital and renewal that's there. And the budget today, the budget you see, or the draft budget as part of these preliminary discussions is it's a working document, and for discussions and for council to provide feedback, any direction to staff, and it's been built based on the existing service levels that we currently provide. Jump right into the next slide before I hand it over to Trevor. Trevor will walk you through the intro piece. Just in terms of the municipal tax levy, we chatted about it, discussed it last week in terms of what that tax levy is, and that's the taxation required after you remove any other sources of revenue within the organization. This year, the tax levy, based on the information that we have in this document, is currently at $22,295,000, which is about a $1.4 million increase over last year's levy.
Can we just change that screen because I can't see that last one?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There's your increase over last year. Yes, that wasn't smoking there. Cover up the bar. Of note is if you go back to 2016, the levy was about 23.7, and 2015 was close to 25 million. So if you look at the reductions that have occurred over the years to the levy, the capital projects, I'll say, have been right sized in the IDCA agreement. So there's a reduction of the funding from the province, and then additionally, there's been over the years, there's been a significant work done in the background to create efficiencies and to provide similar services without increasing costs. This year, some of the impacts that we aren't able to overcome from a service level perspective, the wage increases, which we chatted about it in the meeting earlier last week. The increase from 1 year to the next is in the neighborhood of about $830,000. And that's the overall personnel increase from 1 year to the next. It's not specific to an increase in terms of just increase in wages. We'll get into this slide later, but just a note, out of that number, about 570 includes base wages, and which includes overtime and on call and whatnot. But 165 of that is for CPP, EI, EHT, and WorkSafe. So the statutory benefits are required to provide and pay for. 85,000 for our group benefit increase. And of course, and in addition to included in that 830,000 is about 50,000 for the regional health recruitment liaison, which is an additional expense or cost this year based on council's initiatives with the recruitment retention program and the health side. And then we have an intern budget for this year too, because we were successful in the application for an intern, which is also an increase of 47,000. And we'll get into that detail as we go farther into the program here. And then additionally, some of note increases from last year to this year, about 310,000 for health initiatives. So the budget that used to be looked after in the regional hospital district budget is transitioned into the general government side now. Under council's budget, actually, you'll see an increase in council's budget about $310,000, which is everything around the housing piece, the liaison positions, and there are any additional contract services, the health advocate, for example, the community health plan costs that we incur, our share of the cost of the community health plan. They were coded before as part of the regional hospital district budget. So they're at an increase. And then lastly, with this year's document you have in front of us, the asset renewal process, the asset renewal expenses or costs are at a level that were recommended during the asset management presentation to council. So that's where those, so buildings show an increase of $500,000 from 1 million to 1.5, sewer from 600,000 to 1 million, and increase of mobile equipment from 720 to 860, so $120,000 increase there. Any questions, comments? Okay, without further ado, I'm going to walk through the document. I'm going to hand it over to Trevor to walk through the intro part.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Scott. So the just a brief overview of the binder itself. It's in 4 sections, starting with the overview, and then it gets into more details, the department operating summaries and details, along with the special projects. Then we have grants to groups as a separate section, and lastly, the capital and renewal projects. I'm going to speak to the budget overview, first couple of tabs that you find. I wasn't going to read the reports, but rather I'll just sort of give a highlight of each of the sections. And then if you have any questions, please just jump in. So Scott touched on the idea behind the preliminary budget being it's a starting point for our discussion today and over the next couple of days. So the first area, the net tax requirements. One thing that I was going to say about this table is essentially it's what we're doing with the information is presenting the same information in different formats or perspectives. So what we should be able to do is take some of these numbers and really trace them through to the other areas within the budget binder, including the budget overview and the more detailed areas when we get into the departments. When those numbers don't agree, that is on me. And I'm going to work pretty hard to get those sorted out if we find any errors today. Onto the revenues section. I did describe a few of the major or big changes that we see in the revenue year over year, but when we get into the details, the directors will be able to provide more context for those changes.
Ask a question about table 2.
Sure.
So I noticed that the very last column is change over prior years, exactly the same as 2022 actual. So is there a reason for that? Is that just sort of we're holding that as we work through it, that'll change? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I meant to have that column hidden. And so once we get to the final, that empty 2023 budget column will be populated by the final budget, and then we'll see that that actual change.
Okay, so it just brought it forward so that
That's
it
right.
works in your spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Question, Councilor Gray?
I just have a question going back to page 2, net tax requirements.
Yes.
I'm just wondering why, well, I mean, I think Scott addressed it a little bit, but there is a higher contribution to reserves this year, and there's less contribution coming out of reserves. And are we dealing with that on an individual department by department basis, or do you have an overall explanation as to why those decisions were made?
I can provide more, but it is more of a general answer. Transfers to and from reserves won't necessarily be consistent year over year. And the reason will become apparent when we get into primarily the capital renewal projects. It's really dependent on what work was carried over from the prior year and what new fundings might be required for this year's plan to be implemented. So they will tend, especially with reserves, some surplus activity, they will tend to vary quite significantly year over year. Does that?
No, not really. I understand the concept, but I can ask on each one of those projects too, where, you know, what the rationale was, why we are not taking this truck purchase out of reserves as opposed to, you know, putting it on the tax rolls. Like, yeah, I mean, I can ask the question as we come to each one of those projects, if that makes more sense. Just kind of was wondering that general rationale, especially with the budget increasing by, sorry, I could have moved this. Just wondering why more didn't come out of the reserves or less contributed to reserves.
So just to add to that, the contribution to the reserve funds, besides the changes I said that were made this year between sewer, mobile equipment, and buildings and reserves, there's no change in terms of the contribution. So water still has the 900,000 contribution overall. The roads are 2.2 overall, and so on and so forth. Sometimes from a financial perspective, and sometimes you do a good job of confusing you, not on purpose, but it happens unfortunately, is how the information is actually relayed. We talked about it because this year was a bit of a change based on the system we're using. And instead of saying $1 million into this reserve and we're going to use 1.2 out, we've said, well, the first $1 million is going to be contributed to those projects, and then we're going to take 200 out. We're not going to contribute anything. And it's 6 1/2 dozen the other. And if you even look at the document here, it shows, you know, the transfers from reserves in 2022 was 13 million. And this year's 3, and then the carry forward 686, but 8.4. And that's that combination of both. If you were to add it together, it's a bit of a flush. And it's how, I think it's how from a financial perspective, the information has been also presented. So at the time, when we go through each one, we can talk about that because it'll have a pickup truck that might say it's a net tax levy, but if it was a net tax levy of a round number, if it was a net tax levy of 100,000, then that would reduce the contribution to the reserve this year by 100,000, right? If we didn't have enough of those contributions to make up the amount, then we'd be pulling money out of reserves. And so the same amount is going in to reserves based on if we're taxing, I guess, the same amount for each reserve, with the exception of those ones I commented on that have increased this year, being sewer, the mobile equipment, and the buildings piece. So once we get into it, we absolutely ask the questions and we'll walk through each one. But overall, the contributions are still static. It's just how we're communicating today.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I understand it. So let's just say that the envelope was $900,000 for whatever reserve. And we are going to purchase a piece of equipment for $100,000. So that, and we're going to do the tax for that. So then the contribution to that reserve for that year becomes 800,000. Okay, good.
Yeah.
And that's across the board.
That's how.
No
that's how it's been-
exceptions.
That's how it's been displayed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Where
I
I'd
get
be
it.
honest, it's much easier, I think, and we've chatted about it. We're gonna changes. It's a function of the system and how the new system that we've been running the past couple of years, and our reliance on the information. We recognize how it presents that information. I'd much rather say $900,000 going in the reserve, and this is the value of what's coming out. That's easier to trace, track that way. It's similar. I use the example that when your paycheck goes in the bank account, you don't subtract everything. Your paycheck says this is what you've got, and then any mortgage payments, everything else comes out of your account after that, versus what gets deposited has everything deducted first, which we know.
The only point that I'd like to hear you add to that is you always need to understand what's in the reserve, right? So there's what's going in, there's what's coming out, but you've got a 5-year capital plan that your reserves are helping to fund. And so you want to also keep track of or be aware of what you want in that fund over in the reserves over the longer time. So it's a balance, right, between putting in revenues, taking it out, expenses, and how much you have left in the reserve for future year purchases.
That's correct. Yes, okay. Yeah, because we go 20 years with our plan, and that obviously as you get closer, farther out you go, it's more of a which way the headlights pointing. Yeah, but the intent is that plan is self-sustainable based on the information we have today, and when you play everything, it doesn't mean that reserve cannot go into a negative balance per se, and it just means that once you get to the end, it shouldn't be in a negative balance. It should always be sustainable and be able to fund your projects based on that information. Right? If it starts to build too much, we reduce what would go into it, and we only find that out as we go back and look at the work that we've done. Because if we can defer projects, we do. We see that in the roads piece that we've been able to defer some projects in the past, which helps reduce the potential increases of that picking on roads, helps reduce or defer the need to increase the contribution to that fund over today's numbers, because we go and reevaluate that on a regular basis based on what's in the fund, what's needed for the fund. Is it doing what we said we do? It's that, plan the work the plan program.
Go ahead.
What would the scenario be if we underfunded our capital needs in the long term and the short term? Let's say we wanted to save a pot of money this year. What would the long-term implications of that decision to save a little bit on the taxes this year? How would that affect the organization down the road?
Well, from a simple response, it'd be you run the risk of underfunding it and not having funds to actually be able to provide that service, or increase the risk of that service not being able to be provided because of a failure, right? Because we try to, the intent is to proactively replace things prior to when they hit what that projected end of life is. And there's a number of factors that influence that, of course. It's not just, we don't say, okay, this is going to fail at year 15 and we say remove it. If it's vehicles are a perfect example. We base it on what typically it would look like. And then we say, oh yeah, well, this truck or pickup or plow truck, we can get another year out of it, another 2 years out of it. But the risk you run is if you don't have it funded and it does fail at its projected timeline, then you don't replace it, or you're looking at borrowing, or you're trying to play catch up, right? So I mean, to pick on the sewer one as an example, if you were to go and not fund it at the sewer one, we know that it's underfunded at 600,000 annually, which is the previous funds, which is what the typical contribution has been. If we were to not raise that by to the million where we feel it should be today based on that capital plan, then you run the risk of underfunding that program or needing to catch up, because it comes down to the service level piece. And catch up would be, well, if you break it out over 20 years, it could be $40,000 annually in addition to the extra 400 that you have to put in annually based on that. So the simple thing is you can underfund it and not be able to replace or renew equipment or infrastructure based on the timeline that we have projected, or you're playing catch up if you're deferring costs also, right? And those are all conversations and discussions that council. I mean, all we do is try to provide you what that, I'll use the word consequence may be, what the result may be if you do it, right? And again, it's all around projection.
So from a taxpayer perspective, the same thing sort of applies. Is that you end up taxing future taxpayers for wear and tear on today's equipment, right? So you might put it off and not fund, but then today's taxpayer is not paying their share of the wear and tear of the equipment that you're gonna have to replace someday. So at some point, you're gonna have to raise a whole bunch of taxes to buy some stuff. And so if you don't continually do it along the way, then there's gonna be a whole bunch of pain somewhere. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think we were just moving past the revenues page. So on to page 4, we present some information about the tax levy and assessment. And I just had a couple of notes just with regards to how they interact, the budget and the tax levy. And I think Scott and Aaron touched on it and presented it well last week's committee of the whole meeting. But just as a summary, I see the budget as the reflection of council's decisions on the services to provide and the levels of those services. But deciding on those levels of services, the impact on the taxpayer must be considered. And so that's where that tax levy and the information we're presenting here ties together. It helps council and staff understand what the impact is on the taxpayers and the community. Are there any questions on some of those tables? A couple of them have changed. The assessment table, we provided a bit more detail this year than previous years. Anything jumping out at anyone? Okay. So if we go on to the operating budgets, page 6. So this table here, this is the only place where we actually consolidate some of the expenditures, both across operating and special projects. Otherwise, throughout the rest of the binder, those amounts and those details are separated out to be considered specifically either operating, special projects, or capital. Again, I presented a couple of the very high level reasons for some changes, and we'll get into more detail and provide more context as we go through the budget binder. And the last table I wanted to just reference, and it's been referenced before, is the impact of changes to the proposed or preliminary budgets. And that table 9 just indicates what would happen if the preliminary budget was reduced by $100,000, the impact it would have on the general municipal tax levy on a taxpayer. And so on to the budget summary. All right, so I like this table. When I first saw it and worked on preparing it again for this year, I think it tells so much information in a small spot. I like how we've laid out both it presents itself the same way that we talk about the binder. So we start with departmental operating, grants to groups, and then on to capital and asset renewal. And then we break it out again by department. And it gives us a good idea of the activity of each of our departments. But one thing that numbers don't show is the impact of that activity. So, you know, for general government with departmental operating 4.1 million, you can't just compare numbers across departments. We need to consider all of the impacts that it has on our community. And then moving on to, sure.
So under revenue, departmental operating, comparing the actual of 2022 to the forecasting for 2023, just wondering why we are forecasting a reduction. going from 7,237,000 to 5,857,000? Or will we get further into the weeds of that as
We will get into the details. So that's just the revenue component. And what I think a big part of that is going to be is grant revenue.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
One of the other summary pieces of information we present in the budget binder is the sample properties. And so this takes a look at some specific properties within the NRRM, along with a couple of examples or made up properties that hold the assessment value constant to see the effect of particular tax changes over the years. Again, I found this one interesting when putting it together. We keep the same sample properties year over year. And interestingly enough, one or two of them this year had significant changes. And the reason for one of them was simply a split of the assessment value between property classes. Last year, one property was all residential and it went through a split from BC assessment. So, things like that, we don't necessarily see all the time, but they're happening behind the scenes. So I found that interesting. And the last one, just behind the sample properties, is the tax rate comparison. And I think this is the table, Councillor Gerwing, you had asked for last week, the tax rate comparison. And this table we pull right off the province's website. So they get their information from us when we file our local government data entry filings each June. And then they put it together and summarize it nicely for everyone to see.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just on these tax rate comparisons, which community is similar in size to our community?
Good question. I don't know what the answer is on that one. Let me think. Population wise.
Population would be possibly Chetwynd, but I think the other thing to factor in is no one's like us when it comes to how our taxation works because of the region municipality. So Chetwynd would tax within their area in terms of their town site, and then the province actually taxes on behalf of the regional district outside, where we're the only municipality in BC that actually taxes the rural residents, the rural properties in the hinterland, for lack of better words, at the organization, right? So typically what a regional district would do is they would say, this is our cost to operate, here's what our budget is. And the various service levels and whatnot they provide. And then they, for lack of better words, put a requisition in the province and say X, they back up the budget, and then the province basically creates the tax bills and sends those out. So it's hard to compare apples to apples that way. And then the other function is how we chatted about it last week as part of the budget 101 is how a tax rate's actually determined based on that required tax dollars assessment, kind of spits out the tax rates too. So
We're the only community out of these ones that support our airport, right? Because with the Fort St. John Airport come out of the PRRD, how does that work?
So I can answer that question
Okay.
because I sat on that board for 8 years. So actually the Peace River Regional District is owned by, the airport is owned by the District of Taylor, the District of Hudson Hope, the City of Fort St. John, and the Peace River Regional District. Taxation has been zero. There's been that airport operates itself. So there has been no tax money been put into that. They have a tax levy ability of $10 in order to set it up, because it had to be set up by the regional district originally, and then it went into an organization where they're running it themselves and not for profit. Yeah, it's self-supporting. Yeah, so they get enough from their Yeah, the landing fees and the airport improvement fees that they're actually able to hire somebody to operate the airport and then provide for the capital. They had to take a loan, however, for their runway, right? So they're actually a nonprofit group that borrowed money against future revenues at the airport to pay for that. Where here was tax dollars that paid for it. Correct? And plus whatever you got from the government.
So
ACAP.
So ACAP funded the runway 100%. There was no.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
Lucky. Wow.
Yeah, so any sched, we're a tier two level one sched flight airport. So basically we have sched flights without security.
Right.
And then I'm not sure where Fort St. John would be. I'll pick on Dawson Creek because they're a little bit more from a size and perspective. They have security, so they fall into a bit of a different level from a scheduled flight perspective. But our scheduled flights is a minimum threshold of scheduled flights that are required to meet, which then looks after, so any of the equipment, there's a list, but the equipment to look after the main runways, so 0422, the threshold and the apron one, anything that would be linked to scheduled flights is 100% ACAP fundable based on their schedule. So the full project last year, well, we included up last year, the year before was 100% funded.
Based on the airport designation by the feds.
Yes.
Right, which is based on traffic.
Yes, you get larger airports, then there's
They
a
pay.
requirement that they pay and fund
Right.
themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for instance, Vancouver Airport, YVR doesn't get ACAP funding to replace a runway. It's all part of their larger business plan as a business.
So to answer a little bit further, Councillor Dickey's question about which of these are closest, I mean, they're still competitors of ours from the perspective of potential residents,
Yes.
right? And tax rate has an impact on people's decision about where they live. So for me, when I'm sort of looking at it, I'm looking at Tumbler Ridge, Chetwynd, and Mackenzie. Those seem to be the ones that stand out for me as the comparators that I might look at, recognizing that it's different in its setup. But when it comes to the tax rate that people have to pay per 100 on their house, it's something that we have to consider because people will consider it when they buy a house somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, the next slide next tab is tab 4. This is the Consolidated Departmental Operating Summary. It's both by department and then by expense type. And Scott, were you going to speak to this one or?
If you're fine.
Okay, so with this one, I am going to read more directly from notes, but please jump in any questions you have. So with regards to personnel, base wages included negotiated collective agreements from QP and IAFF, as well as 2022 grid adjustments for excluded staff. Base wage adjustments were estimated based on actuals from 2022, including $50,000 increase in firefighter overtime. This was due to increased call volume and first responder calls. And I don't mean to steal our chief's thunder here by getting into some of these details, but we'll carry on. Group benefits, statutory benefits, increases in premiums and rates that were set by providers, such as Blue Cross and the provincial and federal governments, result in approximately a $250,000 increase. And this personnel information, I think we went over as well in the committee of the whole meeting a couple of weeks ago. On contract services, so this services column on tab 4, a couple of the changes that come into play here are we changed a couple of special projects into operations. They were happening each year and more appropriately classed as ongoing operations. So one of those was the visitor center operations. Hiking guide special project was moved into operations, and contract services for regional development and planning. One of the other things that is included in this is deferred training and development of $58,000. So although we recognize it as an expense, this is one of the areas where we're actually going to not tax for that amount again in 2023. So it'll be pulled from surplus, general surplus.
That makes sense for council? Okay. It's what we've done is there was training that didn't occur, some training that didn't occur last year that we taxed for last year. That's required training, and I mean, the pandemic threw a wrench in their training plans and deferred or extended expiry dates on certain required training and whatnot. So we, it didn't make sense, honestly, to have those funds specific to that training tax last year and then tax it again this year. So any of the unused training dollars that we still need to train for, we had to provide that training this year. That wasn't done last year. We basically, we call it carry forward, but basically what it is those funds last year got put in the general surplus, and then we took my general surplus this year. It's for the tune of about $58,000. 58,000 for that portion of training that we actually taxed for last year that didn't occur, that will be occurring this year.
And that's across all departments?
Yes, yeah. We don't have the rolled up training document in here because we had some tweaks, I think, right?
No, we don't, but you can see that carry
You will.
forward at the top of every green
Yeah.
sheet, department green sheet, there will be a carry forward line, and you will see that.
That's for training, yeah, for some, yeah. And then additionally, there was a couple others, while we're talking about some carry forwards. An example is chief, the fire department annually orders a certain amount of bunker gear, turnout gear. Last year it was ordered early in the year and didn't arrive, which we would have taxed for that as operations. So we elected, it was a tune of 30 or 40,000, I don't know what the exact number was now, but we actually we'll be getting hopefully 2 sets of bunker gear this year, and only taxing for one of it. We pulled funds out of surplus to look after those costs, as another example. There's different items that we looked at to help mitigate the impact of taxation this year based on the fact that we've budgeted already once for it and taxed for it once. Sure.
Okay, and so that was services. For materials and supplies, a couple of the changes or reasons for the changes. Health initiatives that we moved from the NRRHD, the hospital district, into general government has impacted materials and supplies. Scott touched on fire rescue, increase in supplies. That's to account for the supplies that weren't received last year. And organizationally, the fuel budget has increased by approximately $84,000. And we estimated that based on current pricing. Utilities saw just a minor decrease over the prior year. And that's it for the departmental operating summary. The next tab in the binder, tab 5, is a summary of all special projects. It organizes them by department and then shows the total expense and how those special projects are proposed to be funded, whether from carry forward grants or government funding or through taxation. So again, when it comes to the special projects, we'll be able to get into more details with the directors as we move that into that part of the binder. And so without any questions there, we start to get into the nitty-gritty and look into general government. I'm sorry. Okay. How might you do that, Jay?
So the stacks I passed out to you The pink sheets, the stack of pink, will just maybe walk you through, they're in addition to your binders. So each page is labeled at the bottom, the tab that they belong in, and they can become the first page of that section. Unfortunately, the page numbering got a bit goofy, so just assume it's one of one, but there's going to be more behind it. So that summary page is going to be the top page of each of the tabs that it's labeled at the footer.
And, so tab 18, the white and the green,
Those
like,
are replacements.
is there a difference though? Because I didn't see a difference, but
I assume there was. I'm
sorry.
not sure what the difference was, but I was advised that they just need to be replaced, tab 18 and 19.
Well, I get that. I just
Yeah, there
couldn't
was,
see a difference. So
oh.
got my notes. I
Um,
don't see a difference.
160, 951, 7. Oh, that's good.
So I don't know if the right one came out or it
29,
appears to be
745,
exactly the same.
It does.
And 19 is the same as well. So
Oh,
don't,
I thought I had, so I may have put that printing in the wrong spot. I apologize. We will be getting replacements for that. The numbers did change somewhat.
sorry, I can't hear you.
The numbers did change somewhat from what you had in the binder. We'll get updated tables for you.
Okay. Yes. They are. I think the wrong copy came out is what I was trying to say.
That's exactly what happened.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Just so you know.
This binder, there's lots of information together, but we had little mistakes like that.
This is probably not the last time we're gonna hear click, click, click.
Yeah.
We're quite used to it. I warned Trevor on Friday. And that's okay, because we're not gonna get to that tab. So we can make sure that we update that one. Okay.
Oh. Yeah, it's actually at the end. Maybe we'll, well, we're at 15 minutes now. Are we at a place where you can pause, or have you got something that you'd like to finish before we recess?
This is a good place.
This is a good place here now? Then we'll take the question. I just think that's a good spot, is that when you're at that, you know, when we're at that hour or that 2.5 hour mark, that's the time to maybe take some questions.
Yeah, because now we've got the roll-up portions kind of done. We're gonna get into the actual next spot now is general government, which is a department. So
Okay, so from a general perspective, it's probably a good time to take questions. So we'll take a question from somebody online? All right, so is it a written question then?
I have no written.
Just somebody's got their hand up, but they have no audio. Oh, that makes it tough. Can they go into the chat and put the question there?
She was just wondering how the additions, how members of the public can access the additions that you just happened.
Right.
Electronic.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's easy. The electronic, that's the easiest one, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that question's answered then. Good. Are there any other questions from council to staff, to Trevor, over the general portion, the general aspects of the budget? Does it make sense to stop and start up again at 5? I mean, I know we're 15 minutes early, but, or do you want to just get right into it?
It's up to council. We might be able to make it through general government or a portion. It's up to council. We plan on doing a hard stop at 1. We can stop, but I mean, there's some stuff that can be discussed in general government if you wish.
Okay,
If you want.
let's do it.
You good?
Okay, so starting at tab 6, I'll just first describe the layout of the green sheets. So really, the operating budget is presented in the same format as a statement of operations or an income statement. You start with your revenue by type or source, and then your expenses generally by function. In our case, when we're looking at departments, we look at it by major activity or program area. So revenues at the top, expenditures by program area in the middle, then net operations by program area. We'll see that take effect when we look at public works, which does have several program areas that they report on and manage. And then the bottom area is the distribution of expenses by expense type. And that information links back to that departmental summary where we showed it by department by expense type. And so getting into some of the explanations for changes and what we can expect this coming year. Expenses associated with strategic health initiatives are now under general government. We've included council's strategic planning services. Allowance for bad debt has decreased, and currently there's no amount recognized for allowance for bad debts, and we're in the process of determining actually a recovery and along with recommendations on how to approach that recovery. Elections budget has been removed for the next 3 years. One of the things to mention here is, although we've identified the main program areas, we also have sort of sub-activities within those. Some of them are corporate services, financial services, and the common services that we have that are shared across all the departments. Technological services is one of them, IT. And over the past few years, staff has been working on consolidating some of those common services that make sense, like advertising. Although departments can still have their own advertising or own specific costs in some of these common service areas, where it is deemed to be common, we amalgamate it and manage it under general government.
You have a question? Question, Councilor, go ahead.
So I note that under expenses, general government, line 31, it says council. So the budget for 2023 is 721,247. And I just have to tell you that going through all these budgets have finally taught me place values, so I can actually say these numbers now. But the actual for 2022 was 299,998. And I know that you've said some of this increase is because of the health recruitment and retention, and then the recruiter position, but there's a difference of 421,249. So is there an explanation for such a big difference? I guess, yeah, the actual for 2022 versus the budget is quite a bit different. And then moving forward into 2023, are there more that has been moved over in there that you probably told me and I didn't write down?
Yeah, unfortunately with this situation, we do lose that comparative value because the actuals for the hospital initiatives are actually sitting in the hospital district. So that's why your actuals are significantly lower. Now, there's probably other areas just where budgeted activities within council didn't occur. Now,
I can Okay, we can both can. Travel's a big one for council, as an example. So there was a travel budget, and we actually do a line by line item that council can take a look at where your budgets are. That you can take a look at. It's not in this document at the moment, because typically it hasn't gone in this document, but an example would be is we budget for council to make trips. So last year when the budget was developed, it was in place to look after what typical travel would be, which be if it's UBCM, NCLJ, whatever it might be, but anything else that you typically would travel to is in the budgets, because that's where a lot of those funds come from. If the travel didn't occur, and some conferences, for example, last year went back to in-person, others didn't occur, others maintained virtual. So that's one example where you'll see the actuals different than from one year to the next, or the gap between actual and budget this year. And then of course, a significant portion, it's over 300 grand, is linked specific to the health initiatives, which weren't in council's budget at all previously. They were in the RHD budget. But typically council approves their budget on that line by line item, which you will again this year, and it outlines all the specific travel, the various conferences, whatever it might be, mayor discretionary fund, and then you have the ability to reduce, but it's also budgeted to making some assumptions that you're going to be traveling to certain conferences and whatnot, anywhere from one to all. Less travel, as one example, reduces your actual. So you'll see some changes there.
Okay, so then just to recap, one of the reasons why it was budgeted in 2022 for 410,000 and the actuals came at 299, a large portion of that is lack of travel.
One would be, yeah.
And then the increase from, let's just say the typical $410,000 to the $721,000 is that health recruitment and retention and the recruited position.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
And then there's other initiatives in that health portfolio. So
Yes.
it's all the housing. It's the CHP coordination fee, even though 2/3 of it is offset by partner contributions. There is a line item in there for health advocacy. That's at council's discretion. There is some additional contract and materials and supplies fees for the READY program. So like not only the cash incentives, but the value of dispersing those welcome packages, because I think it's a $1,400 value or $1,700 value in addition to their cash incentive, but it's a cost to municipality. So all those things have added up to be that 310 in total. Yeah.
So a question, so is there a place that explains what you just said? Yeah, so there's another, because I haven't got through them all. So there is a page that sort of breaks 31A down into its different components. This is just a generalization of it all.
Yeah, so when we prepared the budget, you and I had walked through that list of kind of council initiative line items. And I can certainly circulate that for council's reference. The health initiatives, we don't have a detail of that in here. It was pulled out of our HD from past years and embedded in the council budget, but I can definitely enhance that kind of listing so that it includes everything.
Thank you, Jay. Any other questions on that? Okay.
The breakdown and the summary of it, because it's such a big increase, I'd like to, when this gets presented to the public, is it shared that all those changes have been added? Yeah, because I would hate to have people say, how come your guys' budget's so high, right?
Yeah.
Such a big increase.
It's such a big increase, yeah.
It is, it is when you view this, it appears to be a big increase, but taken in stride with the RHD budget, it would show that same reduction.
Yeah.
So that's where it's a little bit of a skewed, we lose that history in doing that reallocation. But that council detail budget is usually part of the final, but we can include it in this and I can republish the electronic, so it's in this version too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's the general government operating budget. We move on to special projects. So the pink that, one of the pinks that you just inserted into your budget, I think tab 7. With general government, we have 3 special projects. 2 are carryovers from previous years where we're just wrapping up some financial system changes. There's Great Plains Cloud Services that we're still in the midst of finalizing. A few pieces remain outstanding, and the asset retirement obligations is an accounting standards project where we need to do some work. Basically, we go through our leases, our legal obligations to determine whether we have future obligations that will need to be reported. And so we're well underway with that project, and it's in order to present that information within the 2023 financial statements. And
Can I ask a question about that?
for sure.
So is it because it's the first time we've done it that you're calling in a special? Because that just seems to me regular admin. That's something you can be doing all the time, right? Is preparing that and understanding what your future obligations are. So are we just buying software, or is it a project that we're doing one time? Or, and then that's why it's a special project, hoping that it'll get then moved into the operational. Is that sort of the plan?
That's essentially it. And so what's happened is a new accounting standard was issued.
Right.
And so it's not just regular ongoing work with the standards that are in place. It takes a significant amount of work to implement this particular standard. That's not always the case, but this one does. So we've seen, and we continue to see, other changes in standards where we wouldn't have a special project for us, just through normal course operations that will integrate that into our financial statements.
All right, so special project this time, and then it's just gonna get dovetailed into regular operations.
That's
Okay,
right. Yep.
thank you.
And yeah, behind the summary page, we go into a bit more of the details for each of those special projects. The last one that we have within general government is for the replacement of some furniture. And that's all I've got for general government.
Just to add to the furnishings is the gallery chairs, that's the old wooden ones that were here. We're looking at replacing those, which, and then some of the tables in the Raven room, which are in extremely poor condition. The intent would be to, if down the road, the rental of the building, we carry that for those furnishings. We wouldn't buy new again. It's just the old furniture that's in this building is old.
It would be hypocritical of me to argue against that because there's new furniture in the office. That rubber stuff is finally gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't think we could ever get accused of spending too much on furnishings or anything for this facility. So we push it to end of life and then beyond.
Yeah.
So just, I think this is a good stop point there.
Yeah.
We're general government for the most part that concludes that. Any questions that council may have? To your point around special projects, we typically only add a special project if it's a one and done or requires additional, which one wouldn't be rolled into operations. And that's, and we do that so that it provides a consistent year to year. We do what we can to provide a consistent year to year comparison on the operational side versus peaks and valleys, and just having those special projects rolled in there. And I mean, the change of DRHD blend is a perfect example too, where it adds expenses to that department that weren't there previous to this year.
So I think the only thing that we have outstanding then is that line 31A, the council line will actually be broke down in the new electronic version. Okay. Good. Are there any other questions for staff based on that general government services? Seeing none, then we'll recess till 5 o'clock tonight. Thank you. This meeting to order again. We've been recessed since lunchtime. I did an acknowledgement of the traditional territory of our neighbors. I just didn't have my mic on, but I'll do that now. Are there any questions? Do you have any questions from lunchtime? Councillor Andrews, I neglected to watch you there to see if you had your hand up or anything over the lunch hour. So do you have any questions for the information that we covered at lunch?
Nothing yet. No, it's been pretty clear. Trevor's doing a great job explaining it for me.
Okay, so are there any others? Councillor Souls, I know you know so far. Okay, all right, then let's turn it over to staff and we'll move right into it.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, next on the docket is the fire. So I'll ask James, you can come up. In the meantime, we provided council with the legislative budget for information. So I don't know if you just want to take a look at it later. If there's anything you want to go through now, I'll leave that to you, Mayor and Council. If you'd like to go anything with that, or you'd like to just receive it for information.
Well, unless there's something on there that you guys want to explain.
Jay, I'll let you jump in if it's anything. So
there's been some really just minor changes to the general council budget. There was the change year over year from last year in that budget. Obviously, council devices have been removed because that purchase was made in 2022, but a like cost was replaced with strategic planning for this year. So in that balance, there's been very little change in council's budget. There was a small increase made to the Christmas social account, which is where we do our annual service recognition awards and the event for management staff, present and retired council members, just to account for the number of staff in the organization and inflation in the cost of offering a meal, which is what that does. There was a small change to the cost of the Resource Municipalities Coalition contribution. I think just as a result of the change in census, I believe that membership fee is population based.
Yeah.
And then obviously, as we discussed at lunchtime, the biggest change in that budget is a result of the health services initiatives, which is page 3 of 3 in that document, which is detailed there for council's consideration. So I appreciate we just circulated this this evening. And so if council wants to chew on it, and we can talk about it more once we reconvene later this week, if there's any changes to that we'd like to make.
Right, so that was the full accounting of line item 31A,
Correct.
essentially is what that was all about?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's bring it up the next meeting tomorrow. We'll give everybody an opportunity to have a look at that, and we'll ask to see if anybody has it. It looks pretty straightforward to me, but if anybody has any questions, we'll bring it up again tomorrow. Okay. And this tab 18 bit, does it replace what's there already, or is it in addition to?
No, it's a replacement. So you have to pull the page that you have and replace it for tab 18.
Okay.
And the first page of tab 19 as well.
Good. Okay. Fire.
hey, I'll hand it over
Protective
to
Services.
Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. So this operating summary is going to be talking a little bit about 2022 budget and then how it versus the 2023 budget. Operational areas are the Fire Rescue Department, Emergency Measures and Safety, Animal Control, and Bylaw Department. So the 2022 Protective Services annual budget versus the 2023 budget. The 2022 Protective Services operational costs were under budget by 2.2%. We were unable to get some of our fire department training for the firefighters as they were updating new standards, and they weren't available last year, but now they're available this year. So you'll see a carry forward for some training there. Also, we ordered some personal protective equipment from our suppliers, and we're still waiting. It's been a year for waiting for some equipment that's still on back order that we haven't received. So Some of it has come out of the 2022 budget, but the majority of it is going to come back out of the 2023 budget. And we'll need to order more equipment this year to account for that. So you'll see a carryover there. In 2022, calls for service were up by 114. The majority of the increase was due to medical calls, working with PCEHS. In 2022, we had 4 new paid on call members that were hired and they completed their recruit training. They are now doing their NFPA 10,001 training on Tuesday nights with the rest of the firefighters. We hope to do another recruitment of paid on call firefighters here in the new year and hopefully get our numbers up a little bit more. In 2022, fire apparatus service pump testing and the servicing of all the rigs was completed. And we had 0 mechanical issues or any breakdowns of our apparatus last year. 2023 protective services budget versus the 2022. So for protective services, our personnel budget for 2023 has a 9% increase over the 2022 budget. And that's mostly due to the increase to the wage increase from the IFF, QP, and the management wage increases. The protective services contract services budget for 2023 has a 5% increase over the 2022 budget. And this is to account for the training we couldn't get last year, to bring in outside instructors to teach AutoX because they didn't have the new standard completed. And as we used our training burn facilities this year at the end of the winter here, last year, we noticed that some of our equipment just needs to be replaced. So we didn't get that done last year, but we're planning on replacing some of the burn props this year. The protective services budget for materials and supplies has an 18% increase over the 22 budget. And that's due to the fact that we're still waiting for personal protective equipment that we ordered last year that hasn't arrived yet. And our utilities budget, you'll see a little decrease, or it's going to stay the same versus last year's budget. We don't see any increases there. Just give you a little update on some upcoming apparatus and age of our apparatus. So Quint is 26 years old. So in the next year, hopefully carrying forward to the 2024 budget, we'll be bringing council some options on refurbishing the current truck or replacing it with a used or brand new. So that'll be in 2024. In the last 2 weeks, our truck 1 has lost its motor. So right now we're using a public works truck for our standby firefighters. That truck is being bought forward to this budget to get replaced this year. The truck was due to be replaced in 2023. It just lost its motor a week ago. So
Can we find it again?
oh, we found it. It's over in the compound. We're still working on numbers for what the revenue was for the fire department and emergency services. So we'll get that brought forward once we get the numbers from Trevor. Last year in 2022, we had property value that was at risk, and that means like properties that were responded to were actual fires in that area or that building. It was approximately at 4.3 million. The fire total save was 1.7 million, and we had a 2.6 million total loss in 2022. This is the first time since I've been a member of the department that our fire loss outweighed our fire savings. And this is mostly due to the fact that there's a lot of human caused suspicious arson fires right now in our area. So I don't know if Mayor and Council has any questions on that.
Particularly to the arson or to this budget?
To the budget so far.
Yeah. So any questions so far? So I guess I had one around the contract services. You talked about training, so you must be hiring contractors to do your training. You talked about the burn props. So is that hiring a contractor to actually build them? Is that?
No, so currently we have a training facility and training ground down at the landfill. So our vehicle prop that we practice vehicle fires on, we just need to replace that with another vehicle that we have at the training ground. A lot of the work will be done in-house. We work with Fortis Gas. They come in, they'll remove some of our gas lines and replace them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there is some welding work that we'll have to get a contractor in to do welding and stuff like that.
Right. So can you explain to me some of the other contract services that Protective Services might?
Yeah, so
hire?
we use any mechanical breakdowns.
So no, we don't have a mechanic. That's all done.
Yeah,
by
we bring
contract?
in Profire. They have
Okay.
an apparatus mechanic that works on the apparatus themselves, so we use them a lot. Our ladder testing is all contracted out. Our pump testing is contracted out. The pump servicing is contracted out. Our SCBA, our self-contained breathing apparatus, that's all contracted out. They have to come in and do bench testing and certifications on all of those. Same thing with our cylinders get sent out and they get hydrostatic testing, so that'll be under contract services. And then if we, like, for example, we're bringing in, we budgeted last year, the auto extrication, 10,000 NFPA 10,006 full course, but the standard was the old standard. So we decided we'd wait for the new standard versus getting outdated training. So that'll be a third party, Justin's, Justin BC Fire College instructors will teach that. So that'll be a contract service as well.
Okay, thanks.
I'll add, sorry, to 911, big one. 911's a contracted service. Sorry?
In the protective.
In the protective services.
Right. Okay, so that was the other thing I wanted to talk about was line 47, where it talks about you're actually paid for 911 emergency service 23,216, but we're planning on, we've budgeted 71,800. That's a significant difference. So is the increase in 911 services gone up by that much? Almost 300%? Wow.
Yeah, it's based on, they changed the way they do the calculation, and I believe it's a legislative requirement out of Alberta, how they do it based on population. So the charge is based on a per capita amount.
Originally it was called that.
I mean, originally it was call volume.
Yeah.
So that's where you had a budget of X and our actual, we just would, for lack of better words, have a projection what we think the call volume was, and that's how we determine it. Now it's based on not call volume, but the per capita.
Right. And that contract was established with the RFQ, direct award.
We went through
Is
some
that-
significant investigations to find a service provider that would work with our telecom. So being Northwest Tel was our telecom, we had some major hurdles in using a traditional service provider for that. So Ecom, who provides 911 services across the province, wasn't able to integrate with Northwest Health System.
I see.
Whereas GP Fire was close, they were familiar with our type of geography, and they were able to integrate with that system.
That's good. I just was wondering if there's another opportunity to maybe to put that out with the price the way it is, but I understand where we come from. So we're kind of held captive to these folks to some degree, just because of the way the system integrates. Okay, thank you.
And that dynamic may change when next gen 911 comes into play.
Right.
But for now, with it being the service that we have, that's the relationship. The other thing is that this year and for future years, we've identified an opportunity for some cost sharing with FNFN. So that just with discussions with their group. So that'll offset some of that increased cost.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I had. Anybody else? Okay, continue on, Chief.
Thank you. So last year we did, the fire department did over 220 business inspections for fire prevention to all the public buildings in our area. We did 195 hours of public education to the community members. We've done over 50 members of the community received fire extinguisher and or fire safety training that we've done through the fire hall. We issued 91 burn permits for the area last year. And the firefighters completed specialized technical training for a total hours of 2,518 hours logged for 2022. 9 members have completed their EMR training. We have 2 members that have completed their associate certificate in trauma and crisis intervention. And we have 4 members currently enrolled in the program. And we've been offering that to the community, and it's been going really well. We had 1 member complete their Fire Officer 1, and they are enrolled in Fire Officer 2. And we've completed live drills in water rescue, high angle rescue, and aircraft emergencies. And that's pretty well it for the fire side. Moving on to bylaw and animal control. The bylaw officers responded to 138 bylaw incidents last year, so that'd be investigations. And the main focus in bylaw right now was to have interactions with the community and educate or respond to any complaints that we receive. So we do a lot of education to the public when it comes to the bylaws. Animal control responded to 68 calls for service, and no cats were euthanized last year, and no dogs were euthanized. And they received 2 complaints from rural areas outside of the bylaw area that they didn't respond to, but they did get complaints. The bylaw wildlife attractants, the bylaw officers work with the Fort Nelson Wildlife Coordinator, as you'll see as in the budget there. And we continue to work with her through planning and Sean on dealing with any complaints or issues we get with animal contractants through the municipality and our bylaw area. So in a total for the Protective Services Department, for total calls of service last year, counting fire and bylaw, it was 655 calls for emergency and non-emergency calls. Any questions?
I'll wait till the end. I want to go back to fire, but I'll wait till the end.
Yeah, we're pretty well done the overview there, unless you have any questions when it comes to the operations and
Okay, so I'll go back to the fire if I can and talk a little bit about, maybe you can explain some of the fees and charges. So I know that, the province will pay for some responses that you go to. And I was also wondering about some of the public training that you did. Are there fees involved with those, or any of them, or is that all offered for free to the municipality?
that right now is all free to the municipality. We are working on a fire services bylaw that there are going to be some fees added to certain things like responding to false alarms that we continue to go to the same place over and over. They'll
Right.
get charged, whereas today it's as many times we get called there's no fees attached to that at all. But today, yeah, all of our public education is free to the community.
So the fees and charges that are listed there as revenue are almost entirely from the province for responses that you do on their behalf?
Yeah, so that'll be highway rescue responses,
Yeah.
which we're getting a total number for. The contract for providing protective services for the Fort Nelson First Nations. And I believe that's the majority of the 2.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, Chief? Thank you very much for your time.
So moving over to tabs 9.
Sorry, you weren't finished on us.
So the push to talk radios, you'll see that's a carry forward from the 2022 budget. And that started off as a grant to get push to talk satellite radios for the EOC, and moving forward to give us more reliable communications with the municipality. Like if rescue is in Hot Springs or Muncher Lake, we'll be able to talk with the other EOC or the fire department. So that's a carry forward. I don't know any questions on that one. And be bear aware on the next page there, $6,000 for the wildlife or Wild Safe BC coordinator.
Yeah, I think we've dealt with that one already, right? So, yeah, okay. Questions on the special projects for the chief? Oh, you're getting off easy.
And as you see, when we get into low end, that's where the truck one is in the budget there.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Next. There's lots of pink in this one. So get out your red pens.
Tell me about it. I forego a binder, so excuse me. So good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you because, as most of you know, I'm pretty passionate about the work that we do and excited to share what we have planned for the year ahead. And it's also a great opportunity to gauge whether or not we're heading in the right direction as far as strategic priorities. And I recognize you haven't necessarily set yours yet, but making sure that we've got the support of Mayor and Council as we proceed. So I appreciate being here. For regional development and planning, it's a fairly straightforward operational budget. Most of our work, as you can see, is done through special projects, whereas our operational budgets are pretty straightforward as far as just training and development and wages and that sort of thing. There was an increase in revenue from the 2023 budget to the 2022 budget. We are looking at hiring an intern this year, which has created a bit of extra revenue from grant funding. We did some shuffling around. Traditionally, our visitor center operations, community forest, and hiking guide were all special projects included in the pink sheets. And we've moved those to the operation budget this year. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the intern wages have been included as well. If we look at actual numbers for regional development and planning, if we look at the 2022 budget to actual, we had a budget for 2022 of just over 1.1 million. And we actually spent around 1.02. So we were underspent by about 20,000, which is 2% of the budget. If we remove the wages, it looks a little bit different. So if we remove wages and just look at our actual operating costs within the department, we were underspent by about $48,000, which is about 28% of our budget. And that was a variety of just small bits and pieces here and there, mostly associated with underspends for legal services, professional services, meetings, travel, meals, that sort of thing. And a little bit in printed materials and ads and promotions. When we look at the comparison between the 2022 budget and the 2023 budget, excluding, we see an increase, of a 2023 budget of 269,000. If we don't look at wages, we've got an increase of 96,000. And again, that's just essentially from moving those special projects over into the operations budget. With a little bit around $6,000 additional for training and development. So I'll just leave it at that if anyone has any questions.
Examples of contract services? So that would be the visitor information center, you contract that out, that sort of thing.
But yeah, the visitor, Edison is another one that we have in there as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
All right.
All right.
The meat and potatoes of the department. The operation budget is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So this year we've got 24 special projects proposed in the budget. Some are carryover, some are new. So I'm not sure how council would like to go through these, if you want to go through them one by one or just a broad overview.
What are council's wishes? I mean, it's all written, each one is written there, right? Each one has a bit of a request.
Yeah.
How would you guys like to proceed? I don't have any questions. I don't know if you've all had a chance to look through some of those. Maybe just to highlight each one maybe quickly.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, so the bylaw updates is our first special project. So we started these bylaw updates last year. So the business license and regulation bylaw is in there. The building bylaw and the animal control pound and licensing bylaw. So each one of those are being proposed for updates for various reasons, which is documented. It is a carry forward of 29,100, and we are asking for an additional 3,400 just for legal review for the for those bylaws. The next one that we're looking at is the 2020 wildfire prevention implementation. So this is 100% grant funded through UBCM's Community Resiliency Investment Program. So we've got about 43,900 left to spend in that project. Reporting's due at the end of July, and we're just finishing up activities from the 2020 project. The downtown revitalization plan, this was $40,000 of tax levy with 20,000 NDIT grant, and this project is wrapping up as well. Reporting is due shortly. We're just in the final stages of finalizing the conceptual plans, and there will be a report provided to council here shortly, with the final outcome of the planning process.
So what we received in 2022 was not enough to cover the entire project. We need another 30,000 to finish it.
Yeah, so what we were hoping for was an additional $30,000 to start the implementation of one of those projects from that plan. So the plan will have recommendations as far as things that the community would like to see, and we'd like the $30,000 to start implementing one of those projects. And it's that idea behind making sure that we don't just develop a plan that's going to sit on the shelf, that the public actually sees some benefit from it, and we actually keep the momentum going on these projects.
Yep, thank you.
The next one's the housing/community needs assessment. So we have a carry forward of 18,200 from last year's budget. Last year, a housing needs assessment was completed, and based on the timing and the requirements from the province to complete this, we were using statistics from 2016. But despite that, there's some really interesting key findings in that housing needs assessment, and we'd like to continue developing that housing needs assessment and develop it into something maybe more around a community needs assessment. So including updated statistical information that was released in 2021. As well as start focusing on some of the things that we haven't had an opportunity to look at yet, such as homelessness and things like that. The next project is the 2023 wildfire prevention implementation. And again, this is through the UBCM's Community Resiliency Program. It's 100% grant funded. There's some things that we need to ensure that we are completing in order to ensure that we're eligible for funding in 2024. And a report was provided to council on December 12th, providing mayor and council with an update regarding this program. The official community plan update. So this one's a bit of a larger ask. It is $100,000 we're requesting to update our official community plan. The OCP is a foundational document to long-range goals and objectives for the community. It's over 12 years old, and significant changes have occurred with the economy and social aspects of the community since the OCP was originally developed. So we're excited to put out an RFP here shortly with council's approval for a budget that will allow us to update the OCP. The Business Facade Improvement Program. This is, I think, our 9th or 10th year participating in this program, and it's a generous grant funded from NDIT for businesses to be able to do improvements to their businesses and to help support that financially. So this is, again, $20,000, 100% grant funded through NDIT. 911 mobile services. So no new ask in this regard. We have 15,600 for carry forward from 2022. And this is to cover off various aspects of implementing 911 service in the Northern Rockies. It includes an exchange visit between Grand Prairie dispatch with ours, some signage, and then some contract services for some basically professional services from, sorry, can't think of his name, Glenn Miller, who helps us and supports us with 911 service. The next one.
Can I just
oh,
ask Trevor a question about that? Does that go on the tax form to the homeowner as a separate item, or does it just go under general revenue, or is 911 a separate line item on the tax requisition from homeowners?
It's not a separate.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
So in regards to 911 service, just so that you're aware, and based on a question, I think, Mayor, that you had during the overview, the municipal overview presentations that we did early in the fall, we do have a report going to council this upcoming council meeting regarding connectivity and where we're at with that. It's a fairly lengthy report, but it's a great summary, and it's just so diverse, the different aspects around connectivity, broadband, and the work that's been done. So we will have a report at the next council meeting in that regard. The next project we have is a Shop Local program development and campaign, and this is we're anticipating this to be 100% grant funded as well through NDIT. It will replace the traditional Love Fort Nelson program that we had funded previously. So that should be exciting. And we're currently working with the Chamber of Commerce to develop a local program. The Boreal Caribou Protection and Recovery Plan Review. This is based, the budget is a carryover from 2022 budget of $75,100, and this is to complete the socioeconomic assessment related to the draft Boreal Caribou Protection and Recovery Plan. The next one is the Local Government Climate Action Program, and this is 100% funded through the provincial government, and this is just basically in support of projects that meet the objectives of the Clean BC Roadmap. And a presentation was provided to council on November 28th, 2022. Since then, I have also provided a presentation to the Environmental Advisory Committee, and we're going to revisit that and hopefully come up with some recommendations on how to spend those funds. The next one is the Green Waste Diversion Fund, which is a carryover of $9,500 from the 2022 budget. And this was based on a resolution made by council to support School District 81 to establish a green waste diversion project in the 4 schools administered under SD 81. Uh, 911 call boxes. So this is basically a carryover as well of $13,758. This is just to finish off the project that was started in 2021 for these the installation of 5 call boxes along various sections of the Alaska Highway. Electric vehicle charging station. So this one was actually considered fairly low priority. And we kind of thought, you know, considered just having this one being totally grant dependent. However, we did put in a budget request of $23,200 to install a second level 2 EV charging station. And this was based on a council resolution that was made on May 9th, 2022. For staff to continue investigating options for both interim and permanent EV charging installations in the municipality. The next one is the economic marketing opportunity with Viewpoint. So regional council would have considered this, and it was actually pre-approved in late 2022. For $55,000, and this was using a carryover of funds from the tourism strategy implementation budget. Accessibility planning and awareness. So this is a request of $29,500 to develop an accessibility committee and work most likely with a consultant to develop an accessibility plan. which is a requirement under the Accessible BC Act. And information was provided to council in December of 2022 regarding the requirements under the ABCA, which is a really weird acronym, but that's what it is, ABCA. So that was provided to council. $500 has traditionally been received through grant funding through Spark BC to hold awareness events related to accessibility. Local transportation solutions. So again, this one was provided, a report was provided to council regarding the regional economic development grant funding that was available to create a local transportation plan. And it's an 80-20 split. So we have submitted an application to the ministry for an $80,000 grant, which would require a $20,000 contribution from Northern Rockies. The next one is the Northeast BC Tourism Marketing Consortium. This is a traditional contribution to the marketing consortium that we participate in of $7,000. Last year it was reduced from $12,500, I believe, to $7,000 based on council's resolution to basically match what other communities of similar size were contributing to the consortium. The remote washrooms facilities project. So this is a request of $50,000, and that's in it's a public washroom partnership program as well as the Gotta Go program. And this $50,000 would is committed through an MOU that we have with the partners as part of this project. The rural recreation trails enhancement. So this is a carryover of $10,000 plus an additional request of $10,000. So a small portion of this budget, approximately $1,000, would be used to help support projects undertaken by the Northern Rockies Trail Society. And the majority of the funding, though, would go towards new signage for our recreation trails that we have up the highway. The signage is over 10 years old and has become quite dilapidated and is actually missing in some instances. So the request would go towards new signage. The Tourism Advisory Committee Familiarization Tour, we have $2,800 of carry forward from 2022, and we're requesting an additional $2,200 to for a total budget of $5,000. And this is essentially funds that are available to the Tourism Action Committee to perform an up-highway familiarization tour. And they're requesting a similar budget for this year. The tourism strategy implementation. So the Northern Rockies tourism strategy and action plan was developed or approved by council in January of 2022. And the strategy lays out different actions to be undertaken to increase tourism opportunities in the Northern Rockies, as well as marketing. Essentially, there was $50,000 remaining in this budget. However, we used that one for the Viewpoint project. So this is a new request of $50,000. The tourism marketing strategy. So this was an add-on to the actual, the larger plan. So we're requesting $30,000 of carryover from the 2022 budget. And it's just basically to create a new marketing strategy, and an RFP was put out for this project, soliciting assistance from consultants to help develop a strategy. And that's what the funding would go towards. And last but not least, tourism trade shows. So this was also pre-approved on January 9th, 2023. And it's a $7,000 request to attend various trade shows, 3 trade shows, most of which are done now. So that's it for the special projects.
Questions for Ms. Thompson? Okay, I have one. Do you have enough people to do all this? You've got $993,000 in projects. You've contracted, or according to your 2023 contract, $225,000 to contract out. That leaves $765,000 of projects to be done by your team. And I see that we carried over $262,000 worth of projects from last year to this year. So that jumps out at me as we don't have the capacity to do everything we say we're going to do. So I'm just throwing it out there and just for a high level discussion about, do we have enough people to look after all these projects? I know you guys have talked about it. So.
Many times. One of the challenges, I'll be honest, with the department in the past was a significant amount of carryover work that was continued to be carried over from year to year, which has been whittled down quite significantly through the years by not adding new projects and trying to get through it. A lot of the projects, so the contract services you'll see here will be specific to operational. So a lot of cases, some of these projects will be, if it's in a pink, it's a special project, will be could be done by consultants to assist in that. That's what some of that.
I see.
For.
Okay.
For a lot, because that's what happens is you'll look and say project X needs to be completed this year. We don't have the capacity internally to do it. So even though we have staff person attached to it, a lot of the work can be done through a consultant or a third party assistance on that. And sometimes because of capacity, and other times because knowledge, right? So for instance, the OCP will do a lot on the OCP ourselves, but it's a fairly significant project. So a fair amount of that work is, our budget is going to go towards consultants, capacity, and also expertise when it comes to developing an OCP, for example.
Okay, so process question, I guess, for myself. So you're saying that the contract services in the green sheet is not reflective of the contracts that might have to be let in the pink sheet.
That's correct. Yeah.
So where's that rolled up at?
Operationally, the contract services.
Yeah. So where's that rolled up at then? The contract, like how do we know from the pink sheets how much of that budget is contracted and how much is done internal? Or do we?
Well, depends on the project itself and how it's broken out. Like, so for instance, the OCP project will be the majority of because if the work is being done internally, then it'll be looked after through the operational budget, right? From a capacity perspective, anything outside of that scope of work or anything outside of an NRM employee that they could do or not do would be part of a potential consultants work on as part of one of the special projects.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's a portion of contract services or contracted out services that's not accounted for here anywhere on these sheets that I can see so far.
Not the green sheets.
So yeah, so if we use internal employees to look after some of the special projects on the pinks, that's included in the wages portion of operations.
Yeah, that's correct.
And we have some contract services that we use operationally that are not in the pink sheet. There are other things that we're doing.
Yeah, but we would typically use contract service for year to year.
Right.
Yeah, and anything outside of that is what we're capturing on the special projects.
Right. So where do we capture that portion that might be contract services from the special projects? Is there a place where we capture that in a spreadsheet somewhere?
We do break it out within the budget. It's not presented separately as you've seen in the budget binder. However, for RDP, the contract services portion of the overall spend of 993,000 is 893,000.
Oh, okay. That's what it is. It's just not presented here.
That's right. And I can
Okay.
certainly put something together relatively quickly to include for council with regards to the expense types for special projects.
Yeah, that helps me because of the question that I had about, well, it sure doesn't look like you have enough people working for you to look after this. But based on the numbers I looked at, like I couldn't figure it out. So, but you've told me there's another number that's not here. It's 800 and some $1,000. That makes sense to me now.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we can capture that somewhere. That would be a good thing. Thank you.
Because it is broken out in Questica as far as, yeah,
Yeah.
of course. So just on the point around capacity as well. So this year we didn't add a lot of new special projects. They were ones that resulted from legislative requirements like the Accessibility Act. The OCP is a no-brainer. It needs to be done. And these have been carried forward, and some of our projects are carried forward. That's just the nature of, you know, the planning department. So we've worked really hard to try and clean up some of these ones that have been a carry forward, like the downtown revitalization. I think that one, there was talk back to 2019 about undertaking that, and it just never got off the ground because of staff changes and things like that. So we are working at cleaning up some of those legacy ones. But as we do that, there's new things that pop up. The BC building code is, you know, about to be updated. There's requirements around BC Energy Step Code and things like that. So that will require an update to our bylaw. So some things we can't avoid, but we are trying not to be we're trying to be realistic, but trying not to add too much to the list, recognizing that there is a lot, and that's just the special projects. The day-to-day isn't captured in here either.
Sometimes part of the problem is us, right? Because we drop stuff on you and throughout the year that you never anticipated, or we didn't anticipate at this time, comes up and we say, do it. So it becomes part of the priority, and things are going to drop off the desk and go on to the carryover. So we have to take some responsibility for that as well.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, well, you don't, but we should, right? So that's a consequence of us finding out stuff and adding more projects to what you're doing.
And there is one actually that's on my list to bring up to council that's not on here.
Sure, there is.
Which is actually the discussion that happened last council meeting, because the information, which specific to pullouts and signage and stuff. So the report had to go back to council, which would require a budget if that project was to proceed, or even to get an understanding what the extent and the scope of the work is. It's a significant undertaking, right? So that's something that if, you know, most likely, because council's not making decisions at these discussions, but when we go out between a report that goes back to council and the budget deliberations, when you actually decide on that, will be most likely part of that to decide if you want to proceed with something. But then you'll also have an understanding what the full scope of work would potentially look like and what the cost would be. And then the other one, of course, it's not in here when we get to public works, is the potential sidewalk extension, right? So that's not, so it's on our list, but the document was published. But this is an example to support your comment that sometimes things kind of get thrown out unexpectedly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other questions for Lisa besides mine? Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time. For the recreation budget. Okay. So for the revenue in 2022, budget versus actual, we were $946 under. For the revenue expected in 2023, it's $340,695 for a difference of $27,525. Those numbers came from a reduction in aquatic general swim from 72,000 down to 60,000, which was actual for 2022. We also removed $9,000 from the gymnastic code. We are unable to run that at this time. There's no provider for that. So we will not receive that revenue. We lessened the dance revenue by $3,000. in each actual for 2022. $1,200 from active events to match the 2022 actuals, and $1,000 from adult programming to make up that difference for this year. The expenses in 2022 versus the budget, we were under by $102,000 and $328. The net revenue was down by $101,382 because of that $946 less in revenue received. Our 2023 budget is over by $63,061. The reasons for that are insurance increases of $27,000. Janitorial supplies this year will be up $10,000. And our parts and supplies for mechanical is up $4,500, and then the rest of them are just little $2,000 and $3,000 changes because of the actual pricings that have changed over the last year or so. 2022 budget versus expenses. The budget was $668,000, and we actually spent $629,000. Materials was $516,000, and we actually spent $485,000. Utilities, $550,000, and we spent $518,000, and the other $652,000 is debt servicing, I believe, for the loan for the rec center that was taken out several years ago. Contract services, the 2022 budget, as I said, was $668, $595. The actual $629. We were under by $339,000. Materials and supplies, the $516 versus the $485 was under by $30,000. Utilities, $550. 400 was under by $32,000 at a budget expense for $518,107, and the debt servicing stays the same. 2023, the budget versus the budget of 2022, contract services is up $15,000 to $684,436. versus last year's budget of $668,595. Materials and supplies 2023 budget is $525,120 versus the 2022 budget of $516,235, an increase of $8,885. Utilities budgeted for 2023 is $546,800. versus the budget of $550,400 in 2022, which is a difference of $3,600 lower for this budget year. And the debt servicing remains the same at $652,000.
Questions? All right. 9% revenue, is that historically been the amount that we've been able to recover in recreation?
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. If you go back to, I think, 2011, when the old pool was there and this pool, we were about 11%, I think was the highest we've ever been. And since then, it's gone down gradually every year. And then after probably 2014, 2015, it got lower and lower gradually, a little bit quicker because we lost some of our population that would have attended the rec center, taken part in the activities that they would have in the past.
So it's mainly by reduction in the numbers of people in each of the services or each of the programs. So the programs still exist, they just have less people in them.
In some cases the revenue is up because things get taken on, like the aqua fitness class. I think there's 9 different fitness classes of that with 10 people each now, and they had to add another one on Sundays just recently,
right,
to meet that demand. Whereas your general swim went from 72,000 down to 60,000. for the reasons, but that being said, we also get sponsorships of swims, which is a great benefit to the community now. Some of those swims see well over 100 people, right? Which would have been a revenue of whatever, and you get the sponsor swim piece. So you see it over in this column, not in the actual swim piece that you would normally see. So that's great. So we have FNFN does a sponsored swim every month. I forget the name, West Coast Energy, whatever they're called now. North River. They sponsor a swim. Sorry,
Okay.
Oh goodness, I hope not.
They probably won't ever
Sorry,
sponsor a
North.
swim again, but
Well, there goes the rock climbing too, because they also sponsor that. Now Krista's going to kill me. That's not going to be good. But we see different things like that occurring. So you don't see it in the actual revenue for the public swims, but we see it in those classes coming up. So sometimes it looks like besides the revenue for this, we hope to be up this year in our revenues because of those things occurring and people coming into it. And then the stuff we offer for seniors to come in and take place. Some of it, of course, is free because it's still sponsored by a company or a group. So you won't, right? You'll see it in the number overall. You just won't see it for that specific stuff. So, so there's some good stuff happening there. It doesn't translate into here with the big numbers, like you say, 7% on revenue versus your cost. But that's where that is at.
yeah, 10% is not unheard of. That's for sure. If anytime you're heating or cooling water, it's costing you lots of money, right? Arenas were freezing water and pools are heating water.
Yeah.
So it's
I think a key piece, Jim, Mayor, is over time in previous councils when mayor and council have elected to provide the service to the community, and have elected not to adjust the user fees to keep up or to maintain the increase in cost to provide that service. So so over time, as much as the facility is still utilized significantly, and that's why we do the head counts going in to get an understanding the usage rates, which don't necessarily turn into revenue. But the other piece is that there's a gap being created to continue to increase from the cost to operate versus the revenue, because the revenues are the actual user charges have remained stagnant for years, right? So that's just been the decision of previous councils to maintain that when we brought forward some thoughts and ideas around.
Harvey, have you ever looked at analyzing those user fees against other communities?
Yeah,
Just
Well, somebody's got to ask the question, right? Someone's got to ask the question. I'm the new guy, so I can be the bad guy that asks the question. I get it, but when you're at 9% recovery, it's like, I get it, but somebody's got to ask that question. But so have we here? It's been politically not hands off.
No, it's been done.
That's a
No,
clear
it's
limiting move to
It's
do
been
that.
done last year. Stacy, while doing the director's role, done a large presentation to council, bringing in the surrounding communities' rates, and it was a lot of work to pull everything together. And I believe, I wasn't here at the time, but when she presented that, I think the final decision was to just leave everything status quo, but the information has been pulled, and I think we pulled it a number of times over the years to be able to see where we were compared to other communities. And then, of course, council of the day at that time made the decisions they made, whether it was to, I think the last increase might have been in 2015 when the rec center opened.
Yeah.
For the pool piece.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of good reasons to have it directly. Don't get me wrong there. It's just, when you're covering 10% or less than 10%, you've got to look at this. It's $5.5 million part of our budget, right? So it's a significant portion of the budget. For transparency, the folks got to know that it's costing them money. Nothing's free, right? They're just paying it instead of user fees. They're paying it under taxes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and then this is the first place I see the word other as a line item. And when it's 11.5% of your total budget, I have to ask what's in the other column? Because that looks like miscellaneous to me. Is that what?
It's to be
Is that
payment of the,
straight the payments? Well, can we start calling it that?
There are a couple of items, different items that go into that. In Rex's case, it is all just debt repayment.
Debt repayment.
But we'll also include interest charges in there, and if we were to record allowances, they would go under other as well. So we can certainly always give you the details outside of the report.
Well, it's just, it's the first time, like, there's lots of other places where it is, and I don't know if it'll be that simple to explain what's in the other, but we'll ask the question every time we get to it. So, okay, thank you. Debt repayment. No pinks?
No special projects from rec. They do have a couple capital, which we get to the capital section, so we come back to them. I wasn't sure you mentioned you wanted to take a quick recess. I wasn't sure if you still.
Yeah,
Because we're going from rec to.
That's probably a good place for a break to, let's take a 20-minute break, recess, and we'll have something to eat, and then we'll get right back at it. Thank you. So let's start up again. I think we left off at cemetery, public works, sewer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming. It is 6:23.
Well.
At 14. Tab 14. 14.
So the 2022 for Public Works, pretty much standard, nothing crazy or over the top with the exception of fuel, which was up exorbitantly, as well as gravels and winter sand were also doubled in cost per cube. So those items had impacts on our budget. In addition, our grader struggled in 2022, where we put significant funds into that unit, which is a 2012. And it's still got lots of life in it, but the circle and the arm from the grader broke. And that was an $85,000 cost. But that unit, it's worth the life. For the cemetery, you'll see we're slightly over budget a little bit. We did do some additional landscaping just to clean up some of those sunken areas. The flower contract and mosquito control, one's 40,000 and mosquito is 50. Both were slightly over budget in 2022, and we've raised those contracts in 2023. Though both those contracts have been holding their own at those levels for many, many years. So it was and for 2023, the increases there, we've already talked about the personnel issues. That's the big one for Public Works. I'm assuming that's the big one organizationally. We've increased our fuel budget, which will show up under Public Works, as well as winter sand and gravel budgets by $40,000. And those are the big impacts. Any question?
Yeah, can I ask, so is that increased volumes or increased price for volume?
Increased price. Okay. The price per cube on winter sand in particular doubled.
Okay. We're using the same, it's just costing us more, the
Yes.
price. Okay, thanks.
So every year the quantity of winter sand varies a little bit. We're pretty consistent between 9 and 1,200 cubes.
Okay.
Any questions on Public Works operations? For the special projects, we've got a few.
I had a question on the other. I didn't realize you were skipping through
Oh,
the
sorry.
cemetery and the water as quickly as you did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just.
All right, so I'm on page 2 of 2, tab 14. And again, I'm looking at that other. $260,000 budgeted for other
And again, Mayor, that is all for interest on long-term debt
interest on long-term debt.
for both water and sewer.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
No further questions?
let's check it. Tab 15.
So we've got 3 special projects. The first one is asset management planning. So this is that grant that we had last year, ma'am. So we did the Municipal Asset Management Program gave us funding last year of $50,000. And we've completed that. We'll be wrapping that up March and completing those requirements for that grant. This is an additional ask. As we went through the process mapping project, which is essentially a dashboard for your asset management system, senior management actually identified the need to provide 4 systems. And in this particular case, document control and training programs, not just the process, but all the processes within that system. So this is proposed in order to start plucking away at those 2 programs. There is a grant opportunity in May for $25,000 through UBCM. And this year, we are hoping to apply for that grant funding. And without that grant funding, our hope is to complete the training program and a framework for document control. Both those programs are fundamental to survive our asset management system surviving as we go into transitions. The Boulevard tree lights, this is the carryover from last year. So these, the lights, the shipping costs on the winter lights last year were exorbitant. So we halted on that, and we'll be looking to acquire a little bit more this year. And this will be to complete all the lights, to have the same shade of white.
Councillor Growing has a question or a comment.
I have a comment, please. I don't want to contribute $7,000 more unless you're going to get rid of all the old lights and start fresh.
That is
Like all of, like done, like dinner, and let's just do new. We can recycle them at what?
With and all the same shade too. That's
Hopefully it goes to blue as opposed to the yellow, but you know, that's.
yeah, for sure.
Harvey's looking at the
That is the plan.
Okay, thanks.
And the second part, or the third special project is the cemetery expansion project. So this one we started last year, and when we got into the data, it was pretty clear that the information that we had as far as survey and layout was not good. And so we are requesting additional funds in order to provide for that data so that we can plan for the future of both the Toad River and the Fort Nelson cemeteries.
So question to that, so it's, we're not actually expanding, we're mapping what we have there.
Yeah.
Because I want to make it very clear to the public that we're not expanding it.
No.
We're mapping what's there so we can plan for expansion. I think it's a key difference.
There it is. So the existing plot of land for the cemetery will remain the same. Essentially, we're building the subdivisions within it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a mapping exercise more than it is a construction exercise.
It is.
Can I get confirmation on that though? Like you're mapping, but we are going to be expanding the plots within both cemeteries.
Yes. So up
So-
to anywhere from 63 additional plots to 150 additional.
Yeah, without changing the boundaries.
Yeah.
It's within it.
Cool.
The
Yeah,
mapping is required for us to be able to extend or expand the plots.
So are we putting in roads? Are we Or what, like, is all of that part of this project, or
So the
is it just the mapping that we're doing?
No, it's, this will be the mapping and the concepts for the future of that, of the both cemeteries, which will of course come here for your final stamp.
Right.
So
So
the
no-
landscaping aspect of it, once the designs are complete, would be a future discussion of council, probably in future years. Right now, the space of the cemetery and its current development is sufficient, but we didn't have, our plot layout was very limited. We basically sold out of all reservations. I think we had a dozen plots left reservation in our local cemetery. So we needed a design to be able to even reserve more plots. And even within what's currently developed, even within what's currently developed, with that new design, we have plenty of space to work towards the future. But obviously to achieve the full design concept, it will need future work, but it's not urgent at all still. And we have no mapping currently. We have nothing geospatial to designate plots. So that was, we realized that was a needed piece of work. Yeah.
Does the cemetery include a columbarium right now? There's no columbarium right now? Okay. Okay, thanks.
Over to the airport. So a few significant changes occurred in 2022. The first was the reinstatement of the landing fees, which helped with the revenues a bit there. And there was a RADI agreement, so the Regional Airport Technical Institute, Transportation Institute, so I apologize for that. So they gave us 246,000, I believe, was this year, and some of that was to acquire operational expenses, such as chemical was eligible under that, your de-icing chemical. So you'll see in 2022 we were over a little bit on materials and supplies, so chemical was 15,000 over, as well as fuel again. So in 2023, you'll see an increase for both fuel and de-icing chemical. In addition, there was, we reduced the contract services for 2023, as that RADI grant also allowed us to acquire some painting equipment. So our materials and supplies were increased for paint by $7,000, but the contract service was reduced by $25,000. That's a win. Any questions on the airport?
Just going back to fuel, have we ever looked into alternative fuel sources for our fleets or vehicles or anything like that? Like LNG, for instance. Like, what would it take to convert our vehicles to LNG and run on a gas that's, that's processed here?
I actually have not. I don't know if, Scott, you had in the past.
We did back, excuse me. We did back in the day. It's been quite some time. It's the access to the LNG. I think that creates some issues, and then there's some limitations with what between LNG and CNG, compressed natural gas versus liquefied natural gas. The last time, honestly, was probably when Encana was in the community, because they had transitioned a couple of their, two anyway, for sure, of their trucks over, that they were using plants. But the challenge is the infrastructure to locally
refuel
for refueling perspective. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one. Sorry?
And if you have to go anywhere, like.
Yeah, those limitations. Yeah.
South, it's hard.
But that's the last time. Nothing recently. Also, for specifically the LNG.
We are making LNG in town now. We weren't before,
That's
right?
true.
We're making it here at least, so that's a step further. Yeah. So we might want to consider open up some discussions.
Take a look and see what's in.
Yeah. Counselor Dickey.
I was wondering on the utilities, because we spend a lot of money on utilities and we have to, right? But are we using energy efficient, low cost lights and timers on turning things off and reducing heat by 2 degrees? And have we done energy audits, you know, those types of things to try and reduce that?
It's ironic that you're asking that one under the airport, under the capital program.
Well, I was just
Yeah.
thinking about I looked at the other budget, it was 1.2 million in utilities. So how can we reduce it, even if it was like
Yeah, so we're
limit?
picking away at that organization. I know Harvey's done a lot at the rec center.
Mhm.
We just did the water treatment plant last year. The airport shop was done 2 years ago. And then this year, specific to the airport, we'll be looking at those core buildings and an energy audit will be a piece of that.
Good. Okay.
And one special project, so obstacle limitation surface. You'll see this one quite regularly, maybe not every year, but these are the trees. They're too high and we have to cut them down. So it's just clearing the forest to make sure that the planes can land pursuant to regulations. So this particular one is actually a carryover that we're able to retain these funds due to some in-kind services from BC Wildfire, because they did some burning for us last year. So we're able to use these funds for other purposes. And the intent is to transition some recently cleared area into landscape, which we try to do as much as we can.
Can we transition this to operation? Or is there a reason we keep it as a special project? If it's an ongoing thing. Okay, it's just not complete yet.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Microphones, please.
My turn.
Thank you, Councilor Andrews.
Operationalize it and remove it from a special project for sure.
Yeah.
So there are years where we'll have significant scopes of work. However, if you have to clear a lot of forest, and for those, I would ask for a special request because it would be outside of an operation. It would be much more than $40,000.
Yeah, but if you're dealing with it at the willow stage instead of the tree stage, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even if it means an internal mulch or whatever, it's, yeah. Okay, thanks. Tab 18, is that where we're at? Nope, yeah. Flipping over to the major. Grants to groups.
Okay. Grants to groups. So just to preface the discussion, both tab 18 and tab 19 were replaced during the day. I had some trouble getting the numbers to agree to what we had last year and to what was submitted this year. We do still have a couple of outstanding questions that are going to be resolved relatively quickly. But we've got it's just a matter of degree with a couple of amounts. We're just confirming. So, and one other thing, and we'll get more to it on tab 19, is we are looking at some changes to a couple of classification pieces. And it is currently, I think, introducing a bit of a skew with a couple of the numbers with regards to Toad River. We've been presenting some maintenance type work budget and work within the grants to groups, but it better belongs in operations. So we're going to have a couple of fixes there by the time final budget comes around, okay? So we generally break out the grants to groups between community organizations and then our big four. The golf course, library, museum, and theater. And it just shows the tab 18 does show what we've received for the by application. With regards to the golf course, we're going to see a bit of a change there. They've indicated that the budget that they provided us didn't agree with the application form. So we're just confirming a couple of numbers there, but we expect it to go up. The capital to 25,000, and I suspect operating is going to go up as well.
Maybe.
The request anyhow.
Yeah.
Yes. Any questions on tab 18? So tab 19 is where we get into a little bit more detail on the grants to community groups. Under the expense lines, the general community groups, that's generally $20,000 there. That's the council's grant and aid budget that we get the quarterly requests for. It's showing an amount of $21,447 due to a classification issue that I am working on. It's essentially some insurance amount that's going to be budgeted along with Code River Hall maintenance. So that'll come out and even that up. Each of the other groups listed, the Arts Council, Search and Rescue, the Code River and Area Community Group, and Northern Rockies Senior Society Transportation, all have supporting documents be supplied in the budget binder. I'm just wondering, do you want me to get into the details, like to go through any of the applications? I can say in general, I did take a look through and we've worked together on a couple of the sort of larger questions, especially around the golf course. But I don't go too deeply into the financial analysis of it. I try to make sure that things, nothing jumps out. I did end up sending a question out to the library. They had an item with regards to a COVID grant that wasn't on their previous information, and Danica was able to get back to me right away and explain that there was both an offsetting revenue for that as well. So things like that, I did try to sort of address before bringing it to council, but I suspect there may be questions as well. And I'm happy to try to answer any you might have.
Do we have somebody who can speak to each of these?
Generally, yes, in terms of generally, Mayor, but not specific to some of if there's specific questions, we'd have to go back to the group. If the stuff that we don't have or information that we don't have, we can go back to the group. So if there's any questions that council has, is a good time to ask if we can bring those back to those groups. In the past, what's happened at times, and the approach has changed sometimes from year to year based on council's direction and feedback, is the groups have in the past, a lot of times have presented their information to council and answered any questions specific to their operations and whatnot. And that was an approach that's we didn't last year was we didn't. I'm trying to remember now when's the last time we've done that. Last year was the first year, based on some feedback from council. We didn't go through that process.
The groups present?
Yeah.
I think this council had a discussion and we decided that we didn't want them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just depends on
we made
how
that
they
decision as a
proceed.
council. I have some general questions, like.
Yeah, I only made it through the first one. That's as far as I got in the book, right? So I only got to the Arts Council is as far as I got. So I'm we got 15 minutes
So
left.
given the time, does council wish to possibly if there's some just dialogue, by all means, but at the same time we can need an opportunity to review it or go through it. It's up to council if you wish. We can start with that tomorrow if you need more time to go through it, or we can answer any questions that we'll try to answer any questions you may have too if there's specific ones right now.
Do you want to wait? You've got probably more than I've got, but like I said, I'm only be able to refer, I only got to that spot. Like, I've got some more reading to do.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, okay. Is there a question, Counselor Andrews?
I was just gonna say, I would like to have the night to review this. I haven't got fully through all of these other grants yet as well.
Can I just ask
Sure.
two general questions
Sure.
then in lead up for tomorrow's discussion? So at the, on our application form, it says, please ensure each of the following are included in your application package. So you have to fill in the grant application form and then a budget request summary, and then a copy of the most recent financial statements. And I don't know that every group has included a copy of their most recent financial statements. I think the library has, and I think the Arts Council has, but then I got to thinking maybe the definition of the most recent financial statement needs to be clarified. You know, so I think we should maybe have that discussion, or maybe that's coming up for next year, because the library has included an unaudited financial statement, as has the Arts Council, but then I believe, if I'm correct, the other groups have included like their balance sheets, if that's the right. And I don't know that that's what we were looking for, but I don't know that it isn't.
Yeah, I don't know that, I agree. We haven't been clear enough
Okay.
to ensure that we get a consistent response. One of the things that can go into the decision about what we request from the groups is to consider the timing as well. Generally, we're asking for them to provide their application and the information prior to year end. So we'll often get financial statements dated for the prior year.
Yeah.
So, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you know, to provide some clarity on what we expect and then ensure that we receive it, definitely.
Okay. And then my other general question, just for clarification for tomorrow's discussion, is on the library. In your introduction, or the budget introduction, under groups, it said that the library's ask was 16,000, however many dollars more than last year. But when I look at the green sheet and you compare the 2022 budget to the 2023 budget, there's a difference of $34,247. So just seeking, it doesn't have to be today, it could be for tomorrow, clarification on which figure is accurate.
I can say now that the 32,000 that you see is the accurate figure. In my overview, I had based my calculations on the incorrect tab that we replaced.
Okay, because in their application form, it says the 16,000 too. So I'm just seeking clarification on, is that what the library thinks that their ask is 16,000 more, or was that just a typo or something?
Yeah, I can ask.
Could you? I would
certainly.
appreciate that.
It was interesting. I think it was coincidence that the mistake that I put in my overview of 16,000 agreed to what they had written in their application.
Interesting.
But I will follow up.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'll add, I think when we looked at it afterwards, and myself and Aaron were looking at it, the library put a second request in last year and reduced their ask. So the preliminary budget had one number, and then the final had, because when I looked at the last year's document, after chatting with you earlier today, Councilor Gerling, the reduction brings you to that 34,000 or 32,000 difference.